Welcome to the Irish NFL show. The 2023-2024 NFL season is now so close it's only a Patrick Mahomes shovel pass away at this stage, and we are in the midst of our division-by-division previews. We're going to focus on that self-same AFC West of Patrick Mahomes fame. You can check out all of our other divisional previews and get all the links on our social channels. We'll start with the Chiefs, obviously the divisional champions of last year, so it's only appropriate that we start at that particular juncture. Brian, a lot of people saying they're going to run it straight back this year, which doesn't happen too often in the NFL, but just a huge degree of confidence in this Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes tandem and everything else they've got going on with it. It doesn't seem to matter who you plug into that offense. They just look like a juggernaut.
Yeah, very much so. Over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen various different people come in on the offensive line. They've shifted gears after that Super Bowl loss, and they're kind of doing something similar this offseason. And it'd be interesting to see come towards the end over the course of the season whether that transpires into another successful season. I think the Chris Jones piece is still interesting. You know, at the time of recording, it looks like he may not play next week, and it looks like he's going to essentially sit out and potentially sit out for the first 4 games. And I don't think anybody in the NFL world, Chiefs or outside, would have thought this would have come to fruition, that they would have resolved the issue. And maybe they do in due course before the season. But sometimes there's an underlining issue there that doesn't work itself out. I wonder, is that the only thing? Because with him there, it's a game changer. And without him, you know, you'd be interested to see how the defense plays. But certainly hard to see how they won't be back challenging to go to Super Bowl. Certainly AFC title game.
Colin, one thing that has gone probably largely below the radar this offseason, such as the degree of confidence in Andy Reid in particular, is they're obviously without Eric Bieniemy as well for the first time in a long time, who's been a huge part of their success on offense. But everybody predicted them to roll ahead. Do you think it'll be that smooth that they'll just pick up where they left off without him?
I think it will be because of Andy Reid. To me, Reid is the best coach in the league, but right now, I mean, Bill Belichick has all the rings. Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season, but Andy Reid has proved it at 2 different franchises. The only coach with over 100 wins at 2 different franchises, and the Chiefs are going for their 8th consecutive AFC West title. Only Bill Belichick and the Patriots in their pomp are able to better that. To me as well, we spoke to Matt Verderame from Sports Illustrated, and he talked about how Matt Nagy is kind of Andy Reid's anointed successor. So he went to Chicago. It went very wrong, but he's back in the building. He was very involved in the passing game apparently last year. But look, they've got Patrick Mahomes. They've got the best quarterback. To me, they have the best head coach in the league, and they have a player now in Justin Ross who, if he can stay healthy, and granted there is the asterisk of if there, and I'm usually skeptical on those, because more often than not, if you have a history of injury, it shows up again. But I think offensively, they just, you're hoping as a fan of other teams, Kelsey maybe takes a step back, but again, you're hoping. And on the Chris Jones thing, it may not get done, and Brian is right to highlight it, but Brett Veach came out yesterday saying they are in contact, and I think as we get closer to kickoff, they'll realize they need Chris Jones. Chris Jones had 15.5 sacks last year. They have to bring him back because they simply don't have anyone there. Outside of Aaron Donald, there isn't anyone like him. I think ultimately it gets done, and it's difficult. Mahomes is 16-0. He's never lost a road game in this division. Right, which is absolutely insane when you consider that. And in the division writ large, he is 27-3 as a starter.
I wonder, and I hope you appreciate my restraint, by the way, in not involving myself in the Matt Nagy pylon. I normally am much more vociferous given what happened in Chicago. Although, let's not forget, he was coach of the year before it all went wrong. So, a lot of people were high on Matt Nagy before it all went south in Chicago. I wonder at times, and obviously Mahomes is irreplaceable, if Kelsey is almost underrated as the piece on which that whole offense hangs. People made a lot of the fact that, it doesn't matter who you slot in. Tyreek Hill goes and puts up 1,700 yards in Miami, and even without that, they keep rolling with Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Juju Smith-Schuster. They'll plug in Sky Moore, and they'll get more out of Kadarius Toney this year. But geez, if Kelsey goes down, you'd wonder what they do.
Yeah, I would say Kelsey is a key piece. I think it doesn't matter who they line up at receiver. I think that really doesn't matter. But I think Kelsey and his relationship with Mahomes, the fact that they know each other so well, the fact that, Mahomes has said, he just sometimes says to Kelsey, just get out there, get open, do whatever, I'll find you. You think back to some of the games last year, they're backed up, even against the Jags, and they're backed up, and Kelsey just finds a way to get up. It doesn't matter how many you try to double team him. It doesn't seem to matter. His ability to find space is unrivaled. He is absolutely key, but I see no signs of him slowing down.
Brian, before we move on to the Raiders, you wanted to make one final point about that offense.
Yeah, just on the wide receiver room, you kind of touched on there. Kadarius Toney has been suggested as their number one wide receiver going into the season, and with all due respect, the guy can't seem to stay healthy for large parts of the season. It'd be interesting to see. And an interesting one for me is Richie James. They brought him in from the Giants. He had a really fruitful season last year, despite the limitations of the offense. And he's the direct replacement essentially for Schuster. Be interesting to see how he plays. Like, we've seen players who might have moved around the league, but when they go and play for certain quarterbacks, they just find their feet there. And Mahomes always seems to bring out the best in these guys. So another interesting signing in the offseason. I'd expect to see him early on in the season do quite well, because I think people will kind of underestimate what he can bring to the offense. So interesting signing. Kadarius Toney, another interesting one. See what he does. See what he did in the Super Bowl on that punt return. Can he remain fit throughout the course of the season?
Super Bowl in February column obviously is in Las Vegas. Will the Raiders be the home team, continuing that trend, which we'd never seen for years upon years before it actually happened and a home team won the Super Bowl? Do you think Josh McDaniels can turn it around and take the Raiders there?
In a short answer, no. And I know some Raiders fans won't like hearing that. I know that Stephen O'Rourke has started a McDaniels out campaign. I just don't see it, Connor. I think all of some of the issues that I would have seen in Denver have reemerged. I think he, alongside a significant number of former Patriots coordinators who go on to become head coaches, are obsessed with bringing in former Patriots in the Patriot way. Mike Vrabel being the obvious example who doesn't do that. But consider Jimmy Garoppolo. Is he really an upgrade over Derek Carr? Will Jimmy, finally play his third season where he plays more than 10 games? They changed the long snapper just to bring in somebody that Tom McMahon was familiar with. Tom McMahon, the man who ran the worst play in NFL history, that infamous fake punt that the Colts ran against the Patriots. They brought in Jacoby Myers. Oh, where did he play? Oh, another former Patriot. You had Devonta Adams talking to the Ringer and saying that the front office and him didn't see eye to eye on constructing the roster, and that he he was going to have to try to buy into it, but he wasn't optimistic. He obviously got the tap on the shoulder in relation to that. He tried to walk it back, but I don't see it. The secondary doesn't instill a whole lot of optimism in me. I think the front can be quite good because Max Crosby is an outstanding rusher. Chandler Jones is aging. Occasionally he rolls back and you get to see flashes of what he was capable of in the past. But in Tyree Wilson, I think they've brought in a really, really solid player. It might take him a little bit of time to find his feet at this level, because ultimately the transition for guys on the edge or on the line can take time. But I do think he is a nice addition. I think if the Raiders had a billionaire owner, I don't think Josh McDaniels would be coaching the team this year. They don't, so he is, but I don't think he's coaching this team next year.
Brian, if it's a hot seat for Josh McDaniels in Las Vegas, you'd have to think that if Brandon Staley can't take the Chargers a bit further than he has done in the last couple of years, he may well be on the way out the door. And it's an unusual situation there because often you see defensive-minded head coaches struggle to get their way around the offense. Actually, the Chargers have been pretty much fine on offense. It's defensively where they've really fallen apart, as exemplified by their playoff exit last year. This is the thing he's supposed to be good at, and he's really not achieving the potential.
Who gave me this team on the list? I can only imagine why this team was assigned to me. Sorry, Connor, I couldn't disagree with you in any way there. I mean, he was brought in essentially to correct a defense that had been stumbling for quite a period of time, and they haven't seemed to resolve the run game. I mean, they were gashed so many times last year in the run game. And you're right around the offense. I mean, when you've got Justin Herbert and you bring in another explosive receiver and Quentin Johnson in the draft, I can imagine we'll see again a very expansive offense. And Eckler's come back, and he looks like he's a point to prove after his off-season when it looked like initially like he was going to leave. Then he obviously had the contract. But ultimately, I think this Chargers team, Colin always talks about the Spursy element. They will be in so many games. It'll be explosive. It'll be enjoyable to watch as a neutral. And they'll come out on the wrong side of so many games that will be at the end of the season saying, how did they lose that game? I think it's more so because the head coach found ways not to navigate a win when he should have been taking certain points on fourth downs, etc. And whilst he's consistent in what he does, no matter what he does, he never gets away from it. And when he does start to question himself, Chargers fans actually get more disgruntled because they'd rather see them go for fourth down consistently and just recognize that's the way this team is going to be, as opposed to when he starts overthinking certain situations. And Kellen Moore's come in and everybody's kind of high on him and they expect big things from him. Like, he shuts on it. I don't think this offense is the problem. It's whether this defense can stand alone and come back to a team that can withstand the likes of Patrick Mahomes, and obviously maybe a bounce back here from Russell Wilson when they go up against teams in the division. And I look at the marquee signings. Was there any in the offseason defensively? Eric Kendricks has come in from the Vikings. Linebacker core, okay, fine, he's well established, but nothing really strikes me as a lot in terms of players brought in that can correct the defense. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. They start with the Dolphins. I imagine the Dolphins will think they can get at them. But I certainly don't see them being in Vegas come February playing in the Super Bowl.
Did you think they actually needed any marquee signings, though? I mean, to me, and the general consensus around them seems to be, on paper, this is one of the stronger rosters in the league. Never mind in the conference. They just haven't come anywhere close to achieving the potential that they have on paper.
But sometimes we see teams that are potentially on paper look great, and they find a way to tweak that defense by bringing in certain players with the experience to understand and recognize what needs to be done to correct the flaws in the team, which is fundamentally, a team with a defense that can't stop the run. I think the previous season they were 31. I think last year they were 29th. They're always floating in the bottom 7. They haven't seemed to kind of stifle the up front to stop it. It'd be interesting. I think there was tweaks needed. I don't think they did enough.
It falls to me, and again, we question how these teams were assigned to bring up the rear with the Denver Broncos, because that's where they finished last year, of course, bottom of the division. They'll be the acid test now for the old coaching matters adage. Can Sean Payton turn them around? I'm actually reasonably confident. I know, Colin, you've talked about orange purgatory and the potential that the Broncos get stuck in that horrible territory where you're not quite good enough to get there, but your quarterback is too good to get rid of, and he's certainly too expensive to get rid of. We all know that. I still have an inkling that Russell has just enough left to deliver something that's going to make people smile in the Mile High City this year. As we know, they've an awful lot of pieces. Like, you have to think back to the level of optimism that was there this time last year when the Russell Wilson trade happened. Like, the feeling was that this was the only piece you needed to turn this team into a proper contender. Turns out that what you needed was not to have Nathaniel Hackett as your head coach. We all know how dysfunctional it was last year, and there were many more problems beyond Wilson. I've spoken before several times about how I think, while it's easy to scapegoat Wilson, and there are legitimate reasons to do so, there were plenty more problems there that were not directly to do with him. I mean, we talked about, Brian, when you were talking about the Chargers, how they keep getting gashed in the run game. I mean, the Broncos were awful in that area for a team that is so stout and has so many good pieces on that side of the ball. Wide receiver room couldn't stay healthy. It's hard to get all the talent on the pitch at the same time. That's clearly, injuries are an issue for every team. I think the Broncos were pretty unfortunate in certain sections of where injuries hit them last year. You would hope that doesn't repeat itself this year. I, would be quietly confident they'll contend for the division. Do I see them getting past the Chiefs? No, but I think they're a good shout for a wild card place, and we'll see what happens from there. Any other thoughts before we wrap up our AFC West divisional preview?
Sometimes the schedule works in your favor. Like for the Broncos starting off this season, correct me if I'm wrong, Colin, but like I think week 2 they're home to the Commanders, and week 1, obviously playing the Raiders. Like we saw a couple of years ago, and it was a bit of a false storm where they went 3-0, and then they played the Ravens in week 4, and the Ravens turned up the heat. And Colin sometimes alludes to that game in terms of the Lamar Jackson situation, but they have got a kind of a favorable start, in my opinion, to get themselves up and running. And sometimes when you get a good start, like we saw with teams like the Giants and other teams last year, the momentum builds, and before you know it, you're 6 or 7 weeks into the season, and you've won 5 or 6 games, and all of a sudden there's a period there where you only need 3 or 4 wins more to put yourself in the wildcard position. So it'd be interesting to see how they need a fast start. Like that's every team in this division needs a fast start when you're going up against the likes of Mahomes and co. But it's sometimes the schedule works out in your favor.
Yeah, that is true. The Broncos have a relatively, as much as you can say on paper, but we know once it gets going, it can change. And I expect, as I said on our preview, I think the Commanders will be a bit better than advertised. But there's a brutal stretch once you get into October where there's the Jets, Chiefs, Packers, Chiefs, Bills. So we'll see. For me, everyone is playing catch up with the Chiefs. I think it'll be interesting to see. What we usually see from the Chiefs is that they kind of, they go through it in 3rd, 4th gear. And it isn't really until January that you really see the Chiefs. They have it done down finally at this point. They know when to peak properly. So I just think we've seen it previously. I remember doing that Spider-Man meme of the Broncos had a losing record at the time, and so did the Chiefs. Well, those 2 seasons turned out very, very differently. So I just don't think anyone should overreact, perhaps, to how September goes.
Yeah, wise words indeed, Colin. We will leave it there for our AFC West preview. Check out all our other divisional previews. You can find all the links on our social channels, and let us know what you think, and fire in your own predictions for the AFC West and indeed the other divisions before the season starts.